In May 2024, at least 30 children in Luanda, Angola died after drinking tap water. Not flood water, not river water, tap water. The kind that is supposed to be treated, tested, and safe to drink. Witnesses described it as yellowish and cloudy. 30 children dead from a tap. Now, I need you to hold that image for a moment, because I want to tell you something about Angola that most people do not know. Angola is not a poor country in the way people picture when they hear that word. It sits on some of the largest oil reserves on the African continent. It has diamonds. It has natural resources that dozens of other nations would consider extraordinary luck. On paper, Angola has everything it needs to be wealthy. And yet, nearly half the population survives on less than $2 a day. Angola has one of the lowest rates of access to clean drinking water in all of sub-Saharan Africa. Children are dying of thirst in one of the most resource-rich nations on Earth. That gap between what Angola has and what Angolans actually live is not an accident. It is the whole story. While those children were dying in May 2024, Isabel dos Santos was in her waterfront apartment in Dubai, overlooking the Persian Gulf, posting photos of her lifestyle on social media. Unbothered, untouchable, free. She is the daughter of Angola's former president. At her peak, Forbes called her Africa's richest woman, with a fortune estimated at $2 billion. She gave TED Talks, she appeared at Davos, she was photographed at fashion weeks and film festivals and international summits. She presented herself to the world as a self-made entrepreneur, a feminist icon, the face of a new and modern Africa. And according to investigators across 5 countries, virtually every cent of that fortune came from the same place: Angola's public resources. The oil money, the diamond money, the state contracts that were supposed to build a nation and instead built one family's private empire. $1.14 billion. That is the figure Angola's government claims was stolen through her dealings. And as of today, Isabel dos Santos has never spent a single day in a prison cell. She has never stood trial, not once. Not for any of the 12 criminal charges that have been filed against her. So who exactly is she? How did she build this empire? And how, with Interpol warrants and court orders and sanctions from multiple governments stacked against her, does she remain completely free? Stay with me. To understand how this happened, you have to start not with Isabel, but with her father. Because without him, none of this exists. Not a single piece of it. In 1979, José Eduardo dos Santos became the second president of Angola. He would hold that office for 38 years. 38 years. Angola had oil, Angola had diamonds, Angola had vast natural wealth that should have lifted millions of people out of poverty across those decades. Instead, throughout his entire tenure, the country remained one of the poorest on Earth. That is not misfortune. That is a choice. That is a system designed from the inside to work exactly the way it worked. Isabel was born in 1973 in Baku, Azerbaijan, where her father had been studying. She spent her formative years in London, attended private schools, and eventually earned a degree in electrical engineering from King's College London. She returned to Angola in her mid-20s with a solid education, a famous last name, and a father who controlled absolutely everything worth controlling in the country. Her first venture was a nightclub and restaurant on Luanda Island, which she opened in 1997 at age 24. She used her father's political connections to win a trucking contract cleaning the capital. Small beginnings by the standards of what was coming. But the pattern was already established. The presidency was the mechanism, Isabel was the primary beneficiary. Then, in 1999, when she was 26 years old, her father handed her a 25% stake in Unitel, Angola's first private mobile phone network, through a Gibraltar holding company by presidential decree. No competitive tender, no parliamentary debate, no justification offered to the Angolan public whose national resources were being allocated. He signed a piece of paper and handed his daughter the cornerstone of what would become a $2 billion personal empire. Unitel went on to dominate Angola's entire telecommunications sector. That original stake was the seed of everything that followed. Between 2006 and 2012, the presidential decree machine went into overdrive. Her father signed decree after decree transferring controlling stakes and monopoly licenses across the most profitable sectors of the Angolan economy directly to companies she owned or controlled. banking, cement, retail, television broadcasting, beer production, diamonds. In every case, no competitive tender was held, no parliamentary oversight was applied, no justification was given to the public whose resources were being distributed. Angolan's sovereign wealth fund provided the capital. Her companies collected the contracts. When things went wrong, the state absorbed the losses. When things went right, the profits moved offshore. Now, here is where it becomes genuinely hard to believe. In 2012, Angola's state diamond company, Sodium, was directed into a partnership to purchase a luxury Swiss jewelry brand called de Grisogono. Sodium contributed $78 million of its own funds. It then borrowed another $98 million from a bank that was partly owned by dos Santos herself, at 9% interest with repayment guaranteed by the Angolan treasury. Angola provided almost all the money. Angola received half the ownership stake. Isabel dos Santos and her husband, Sindica de Colo, received the other half, plus full management control over how the brand was operated. And what did they do with that control? They threw celebrity parties at the Cannes Film Festival on the French Riviera. Press photographs from 2015 and 2016 show dos Santos and Docolo surrounded by Paris Hilton, Nicole Scherzinger, and Rita Ora. The venues were glamorous, the champagne was flowing, and every dollar funding those events had come from Angola's state diamond company, from a state that could not provide clean water to its own children. Sodium estimates it lost over $200 million through this single arrangement. De Grisogono filed for bankruptcy within weeks of the investigation being published. But everything up to this point was a warm-up, because in June 2016, her father did something that handed Isabel dos Santos direct control over the single most important financial institution in the entire country. He appointed her chairwoman of Sonangol, Angola's state oil company, the entity responsible for 95% of all government revenue, the beating financial heart of the nation. She moved fast. She restructured the management, importing external consultants from firms including PwC and Boston Consulting Group, who collected millions in fees and apparently asked no meaningful questions about what they were enabling. She introduced what investigators would later describe as a parallel management system, routing key decisions through shell companies in Dubai and Malta, completely beyond the reach of Angola's regulatory framework. Real decisions were being made outside Angola by people accountable to nobody inside Angola. And she assigned herself a monthly salary of $50,448. Nearly $19,000 more per month than any previous Sonangol chief executive had ever taken home. Then in November 2017, Angola got a new president, João Lourenço. João Lourenço was sworn in after her father finally stepped down from power. Within 2 months, Lourenço fired Isabel dos Santos from Sonangol. What happened in the 24 hours that followed is one of the most audacious single acts in the entire history of financial crime. On November 15th, she was dismissed. The next morning, November 16th, Sonangol's operating account opened with $57 million sitting in it. By the end of that same day, the account held $309. $309 in a single business day. The money had moved in 3 separate wire transfers, executed by her chief financial officer, Sarju Raikondalia, into an account belonging to a Dubai company called Matter Business Solutions. That company was registered to Paula Oliveira, a close personal friend and associate of dos Santos. Dubai authorities at the time operated under no legal requirement to record who actually benefited from the receiving account. The money arrived, the paperwork was clean, no questions were asked, and none were required. And then there was the Unitel arrangement. While sitting on Unitel's board of directors, dos Santos signed loan agreements worth over 322 million euros from Unitel to her own 100% personally controlled holding company in the Netherlands. She was the signatory authorizing the loan on behalf of Unitel as a board director. She was also the sole owner of the company receiving the money. She signed both sides of the same transaction, at below market interest rates, effectively lending herself hundreds of millions of euros from a company she was supposed to be overseeing on behalf of its shareholders. When Unitel eventually brought a case against her in London's High Court, the court froze $733 million of her assets. That is from a single case, about a single company. Before you count de Grisogono, before you count anything else in the network. How does something on this scale function without being stopped? The answer is professional help, not from shadowy figures in backrooms, from the most recognizable firms in the world. PwC Angola helped establish the Malta shell companies used to hold and move extracted funds. PwC collected over $10 million in auditing fees from Dos Santos shell companies and was later charged alongside her in Angola's criminal indictment. Boston Consulting Group earned over $2.7 million consulting for her companies. McKinsey was paid for work carried out during her Sonangol chairmanship. Between PwC and BCG alone, over $5.6 million in fees changed hands between 2010 and 2017. These firms provided something that no amount of money can manufacture on its own: legitimacy. Their names on the paperwork meant that banks processed transfers without flagging them, that Western institutions engaged without asking hard questions, that the entire offshore architecture could interface smoothly with global financial systems as though it were completely routine business. As of today, not one of the major firms involved has faced criminal consequences in their home jurisdictions. There is one detail in this case that I keep returning to. In Luanda, there was a fishing community called Areia Branca. 3,000 families, generations of people who had lived and worked on that stretch of water their entire lives. To make way for the Luanda Master Plan, a $15 billion urban redevelopment project that Dos Santos was central to directing, those 3,000 families were evicted at gunpoint in the middle of the night. Their homes were bulldozed. They were relocated to makeshift shelters beside open sewage canals. The project was eventually canceled by Angola's new government. The community was already destroyed. Meanwhile, the documents captured in the Luanda Leaks show that during a period of severe economic recession across Angola, Isabel dos Santos spent $408,000 renovating a Lisbon apartment. The receipts are in the leaked files, line by line, including $7,165 on heated towel racks. In a country where children were drinking contaminated water from their taps and dying from it, her finance team was carefully documenting heated towel racks. On January 19, 2020, the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists published the Luanda Leaks. A whistleblower, later identified as Portuguese hacker Rui Pinto, had handed over 715,000 financial and business documents to a whistleblower protection organization in Paris. ICIJ then spent months coordinating 120 journalists across 36 countries, using artificial intelligence and network analysis tools to trace the connections running through hundreds of thousands of individual files. What they found was not simply theft, it was architecture. 400 companies across 41 countries, including 94 entities in secrecy jurisdictions like Malta, Mauritius, and Hong Kong. A structured, deliberate, multi-decade system for extracting public wealth and placing it beyond the reach of any single government. Angola charged her with 12 crimes including embezzlement, money laundering, influence peddling, and forgery. The United States sanctioned her in December 2021 and barred her from the country. The UK sanctioned her in November 2024, officially calling her a notorious kleptocrat and imposing a full asset freeze and travel ban. Interpol issued a red notice in 2022. A Dutch court ruled she had illegally siphoned over 52 million euros from Sonangol through Dutch shell companies. The London High Court froze $733 million of her assets. Her husband, Sindika Dekolo, died in a freediving accident near Dubai in October 2020, aged 48. His assets still frozen at the time of his death. Her father, Jose Eduardo dos Santos, died in a Barcelona clinic in July 2022, aged 79, having quietly secured himself permanent immunity from prosecution before leaving office. He never faced justice for anything. His son, Jose Filomeno, was convicted of fraud related to Angola's sovereign wealth fund. His daughter remains in Dubai, free, uncharged, untried. Isabel dos Santos is in Dubai right now. Waterfront apartment, Persian Gulf view. Regular social media posts, every legal proceeding described publicly as a politically motivated witch hunt against her. Dubai has no extradition treaty with Angola, no extradition treaty with Portugal, and no visible urgency about the accumulating stack of international warrants and court orders pointing at a woman living on their waterfront. 5 countries have sanctioned or taken formal legal action against her. $733 million frozen in London alone. 12 criminal charges waiting in Angola, A European court has already ruled against her, and she has not spent a single night in custody. Not one. Her father ran Angola for 38 years. The country had oil, it had diamonds, it had every natural advantage a developing nation could reasonably ask for. And at the end of those 38 years, children in the capital were dying from tap water. That is what grand corruption actually costs. Not in abstract billions, not in frozen assets and legal filings, in children. In fishing families evicted at gunpoint in the middle of the night. In communities built beside sewage canals. In a country that had everything and was left with almost nothing, while one family quietly moved the difference into apartments in Lisbon and penthouses in Monaco and shell companies in Malta. And the woman at the center of it is still free. If this story matters to you, share it. Subscribe so you never miss a case that actually needs to be told. Until next time.